Hello folks, and welcome to the Non-Diet Yogi podcast, where we explore yoga, earth-based living and gentle nutrition through a non-diet lens. I'm your host Casey Conroy, non-diet dietitian and yoga teacher, and this is episode 9, COVID-19 and diet culture. So I'm recording this in April 2020 in Australia, when the curve on the COVID global cases and deaths graph is looking particularly exponential. And as of last week, my family had completed 2 weeks of self-quarantine after returning from an overseas trip. But now that we're out of quarantine, I don't think much is going to change. We're still staying as much as possible at home, as per the government recommendations, and life is really different now compared to when we left. So when we left in early March, there were whisperings of COVID that were starting to seep into our collective consciousness, I guess, but they were just whisperings. And as a country, we were just starting to get our shit together, really. We'd been through terrible bushfires and then floods, and then this pandemic hit, a virus of which we know so little. And so far, there is no cure. And the collective anxiety and fear that's, I guess, stemming from that lack of knowledge and control over this virus seem to become more palpable with each passing day. And I know all of that sounds a bit dire, but yeah, just really wanting to be really real about what's going on, because to be honest, when I first heard about this, when we were leaving Australia a month ago, I wasn't overly worried. That was before I found out more about how this virus is actually moving and how rapidly it's doing so. As Charles Eisenstein recently said, this pandemic is a proxy for all our unspeakable fears. Which is a big statement. The uncertainty that seems to be has really arrived along with COVID is a really big trigger for trauma, all kinds of trauma, PTSD, eating disorders, and diet trauma as well. And what's happening right now, it's either stressful in and of itself, or it might be kicking up old traumas, re-traumatizing people, or it might just be traumatic in and of itself, on top of all the other stuff that we're already dealing with, living as humans. So in this episode, I just really want to have some real talk about how that fear is impacting us as people, and people who are trying to take care of ourselves, myself included, as best as we can, how all this stuff is impacting us as health practitioners, as folks with ambiguous, precarious kind of relationships with food and our bodies, and some thoughts on what we can do to help ourselves and each other come out the other side, whenever that may be, relatively unscathed. But first, I want to set the scene and talk about how diet culture is manifesting at this time, and that includes wellness culture as well, and how this may be amplifying any food and body concern you may be having. And all kinds of people experience food, eating and body concerns. So the first thing I'll talk about is some of the kind of basically really unhelpful health advice that's being circulated at the moment, just so you can keep an eye out for it. If you do hear some of this stuff, just to know that you can red flag it straight away. There is a lot of unhelpful and very often, if you are on social media, unsolicited health advice being given out, when of course we were already drenched in diet wellness culture. And it seems to me that this is kind of leading to this downpour of wellness society. There's definitely a heightening of worry and stress over our wellness. And if you want to learn more about that term, you can listen back to episode 6, I think it was, with Chandrika Gibson. She defines wellness as opposed to well-being and health really beautifully. There seem to be a couple of different levels of bullshit health advice, to put it bluntly. There's kind of this seemingly innocuous level. Then there's this kind of the social media kind of stuff that's out there as well. And then there's just straight out fat phobia and weight stigmatizing stuff. So I'll just speak briefly about these 3 different kinds of bullshit health advice that I'm seeing, so you can spot them and so that you can take steps to minimize their appearance in your life, or at least in your social media feed. So this first kind of level I've spotted is this seemingly innocuous health advice, where we've got celebrity doctors or kind of megastar functional medicine practitioners perhaps giving out what sounds like good advice, but actually is potentially also very privileged advice. So things like make sure you're eating 8 to 10 serves of plant foods a day, that you're taking your zinc and your vitamin A and vitamin C and D and your quercetin and your probiotics, and that, you're doing your red light therapy and your hyperbaric oxygen therapy to support your immune system. And that's all great, that's all fine, except for the fact that some people, I would actually say a lot of people, can't access that stuff, can't access whole foods, let alone a hyperbaric chamber, and are maybe living off what's in their pantry because they don't have friends or family who are able to bring them groceries and they can't afford home delivery. So there's just that. And of course, this advice is given with really great intention, and it's definitely not going to hurt if you can do those things. And yeah, it may help to support your immune system, but I see some panic from people who are not able to access those things and are genuinely worried that they're going to get COVID because they can't buy the high-grade vitamin C. And I think that's really sad and adds unnecessary stress to an already stressful situation. Kind of still in the same kind of advice, this level of the seemingly innocuous advice is something I'm hearing a lot of, which is get off sugar, get off starchy foods. There's this claim that these foods feed the virus and cause your blood sugar to spike, and that damages your immune system. And I could talk, this is a whole episode in and of itself. But personally, I don't know anyone who sits down and eats a bag of sugar. When we eat sugar, whether it's refined sugar or natural sugars in fruits, it's usually, at least some of the time, it's alongside protein and fat within a meal, and that's a completely different story to sitting down to a bag of lollies and nothing else but a bag of lollies. And, even if you are sitting down to a bag of lollies, will that necessarily damage your immune system? I think we really need to think about context. We need to think about foods eaten with these foods. We need to think about current health status. We need to think about current stress levels, living conditions, context. If someone's eating a couple of cookies or a packet of cookies along with their normal dinner or as dessert, that likely has vitamin C and zinc and maybe some protein and some other things in it that's going to support health. Do we really want to get people panicking about the cookies that they're eating alongside with the rest of their food when there's a serious pandemic going on? I would say no. I would actually add that the stress and anxiety generated by worrying about whether you should eat that cookie or not along with your dinner is possibly more damaging to your immune health than eating the cookie would be. So the second level of bullshit health advice I'm seeing is the stuff on social media that kind of sits under the umbrella of wellness wankery. I love saying that word. Thank you, Louise Adams, who really implanted that term in my head for the first time. Louise has an amazing podcast called All Fired Up, and if you haven't listened to it, you absolutely have to. So there is a lot of bullshit wellness advice on social media at this time. I've had fellow yoga teachers sending me huge private messages with health advice, and I'm putting advice in air quotes. One was claiming to be insider information from the Royal Brisbane Hospital. And it just had the usual rubbish stuff, that if you can hold your breath for 10 seconds, you don't have coronavirus. Just keep your throat moist, drink water every 15 minutes, and that this will protect you from getting coronavirus. This is all medically inaccurate. Health professionals do not circulate health advice via insider Facebook messages. That just isn't how it works. You might also stumble across or have these things hurled at you. Long lists of vitamins and essential oils and other things, colloidal silver that you should be using. Often it's from unqualified or at least questionable sources. And again, really great intentions behind this stuff, and people just want to help. But it's not always actually helpful nor medically accurate. And it can be really misleading to think, well, if I just take all these vitamins and this homeopathic, which I've been told will protect me from COVID, yes, that is out there, then I'll be protected from it. And I think that we run the risk of people possibly taking risks that they might not otherwise take if they feel that there's this false sense of security garnered by, taking the essential oils and the right so-called things. So then, also under the social media shitstorm umbrella, there's, and this is really controversial, but I'm going to say it, there's the multi-level marketing stuff, which honestly really, really gets my goat. There is a lot of this happening at the moment, and I try as best as I can to filter this stuff out, but it does still trickle through to my private messages sometimes from well-meaning acquaintances, and where we get MLM ambassadors claiming that their products will protect you from coronavirus by building your gut immunity, for instance, or, Amway's got an air filtration device that at one point they were claiming will protect you from COVID. I've had messages sent to me with all kinds of stuff. There's organic hand sanitizers made of all natural whatever, claiming to be approved by the World Health Organization against coronavirus. Can you feel my air quotes? That also cost $90 a litre. And then, of course, there's the wellness ambassadors inviting people, and a lot of people have lost their jobs at this point in time, but inviting newly unemployed people to join their downline. In my eyes, trying to get people to join a pyramid scheme during a crisis is unethical, especially given the statistics showing that the vast majority, so over 90%, in some cases it's much closer to 98%, the vast majority of people who join these things lose money overall. And I guess mixed in with all this is possibly the worry and maybe the discomfort, maybe even humiliation over realizing that what you're offering is a non-essential service that's only accessible to a privileged few. We've got yoni masseuses, we've got wellness advocates with home businesses based on multi-level marketed products, and these people may suddenly find themselves out of work and really frustrated and stressed and scared. And of course, we're all human, and I guess that leads people to putting out really questionable posts trying to get people to join their downline and making unsubstantiated claims. And that's all understandable. But I think this pandemic has a way of really highlighting what is necessary and what is not, and of highlighting whether our relationships with others have hinged first and foremost on truly helping other people or serving our own needs, possibly at the financial and energetic expense of others, even if it's not intentional. We're now going to have to form bonds with people that doesn't involve me selling them shit. And have I cared enough about people for them to still want me to be in their lives now? If you can't already tell, I'm not a fan of multi-level marketing, and I think in the situation we now find ourselves in, there's a lot of really questionable stuff going on. So I get it, and I also think people need to be really wary of that stuff and not succumb to the fear mongering. Of course, I recently also found out the medical medium is claiming that celery juice cures the coronavirus. Obviously, it doesn't. For anyone still thinking of doing a celery juice cleanse, surely this seals the deal. Please don't. Please don't waste your money, time, resources, and energy. So the third and final kind of health wellness rubbish that I've been seeing with COVID-19 is, of course, the fat phobic and the weight stigmatizing stuff. And this is everywhere. It's diet culture and it's fat phobia. The quarantine 15, which took off as a trending hashtag last week, I think it was, where people really highlighting why we should be worried about gaining weight while being stuck at home or while being in isolation, self-quarantine. Really, we really should be worried about not catching coronavirus rather than stressing out over gaining a couple of kilos. I think that's possibly a more pressing concern. Diet culture, good old diet culture. People putting it out there that now is a good time to start intermittent fasting or keto because we've got less access to food. Just no. It's never a good time to start intermittent fasting or keto, in my opinion. And then, of course, there's the weight bias from the World Obesity Organization, I believe. There's this horrible thing spreading that people in a higher BMI have a higher risk of getting coronavirus, of getting COVID. And as one of my colleagues said on a practitioner Facebook forum, does every fucking thing have to be about weight? Seriously. Thank you, Jaslyn Dugmore. You really summed it up. And I just want to clarify that there is no evidence to suggest that BMI is a risk factor for admission to ICU with COVID-19. According to the latest report from the Intensive Care National Audit and Research Centre in the UK, BMI is just not a risk factor. The distribution of the people who were admitted critically ill with COVID follows the BMI distribution of the general population, so there is no connection. And funnily enough, a higher BMI seems to be slightly protective against admission when you look at the data from 2017-2019 of patients with non-COVID-19 viral pneumonia. So a high BMI may even be slightly protective. There is one caveat that really disturbed me, and that is that fat people may get turned away from care if they are infected with COVID, not because there's something wrong with their bodies, but due to a deficit in resources and skills. A larger bed is needed for these folks. You may need 2 people to turn them instead of 1. You're not dying in ICU because you're sicker with a high BMI, but because the resources aren't there to help you. A high BMI doesn't pose a higher risk of people contracting coronavirus, but the risk of dying of COVID once you contract it due to that resource and skill deficit is there, and that's a social justice issue. It's not because there's something wrong with your body. So that makes me really angry. Yeah, that could be a source of this misinformation. But again, it's not because you are less well or there's something wrong with your body. It's a social justice issue. So this is a little reminder to myself, I guess, that if you're feeling rage, if you're feeling upset, like I was when I first heard about that, expressing yourself helps. Talking to others helps, whether it's friend, trusted family member, or a practitioner. Try not to keep it to yourself. Try not to allow it to fester. And of course, I'm not just talking about being angry at stupid rumors being spread about higher BMI folks being more likely to get sick with COVID, but just in general. So that's all I want to say, I think, about the fat phobic and weight stigmatizing stuff. I think I'm going to, and the bullshit health stuff that's circulating. I think, at least so far, hope that gives you an idea of what to look out for and just ignore. Unfollow. Mute. The other thing that's been showing up, that especially in the wellness circles I'm part of, are conspiracy theories. And that makes sense, because the trauma that's showing up right now, it might be manifested for some people as, say, conspiracy theories that are often stated quite matter-of-factly over social media. And I guess in a time of near total loss of control and our usual liberties, it's totally understandable to want to feel a little bit more in control of things. And conspiracy theories grant some folks that, I think. It's comforting. Some of these theories are comforting because the solution is really black and white then. It's just to dominate and defeat the bad thing, whether it's the people who man-made created the coronavirus in the first place. That's a conspiracy theory, or whatever. It just seems like there's a really easy solution, that we can expose these assholes and destroy them and take them down. And I guess feeling like we're privy to a grand truth that everyone else is too stupid or brainwashed or medicated or whatever to realize, is a way to feel in control. And it's a self-regulation mechanism, perhaps, as well as a way to genuinely try to help people. But unfortunately, it generates a lot of fear and stress. Speaking more specifically to the wellness world, my friend Nara, who I interviewed in episode 3 about Ayurveda, actually made an interesting observation the other week that many people who identify as light workers, at least in his experience, or are of some sort of spiritual inclinations, seem quite obsessed with spreading conspiracy theories at the moment. And these theories can't be proven, and some of them are just downright ridiculous and obviously at least have very major flaws. But what is evident is that pushing these narratives is causing a lot of stress and fear and anxiety in our communities, possibly for no good reason. And I get it, just trying to really put myself in the shoes of people who are compelled to spread conspiracy theories. Uncertainty is a huge trigger for trauma, as I spoke about earlier, and it can bring up lots of fear. And many self-identified healers and light workers who've found their way to that calling because of past trauma, so including myself here, can really be feeling that fear and that trauma right now, just like everyone else. There's either this frantic push to uncover the truth, in air quotes, whether it's all a hoax or this is the apocalypse. But the truth, I think, is a diversion, and it's a diversion from what we really need to be focusing on right now. The truth, in inverted commas, is a diversion, and we need to be focusing on connection and supporting each other and empathy right now. I think those are the things that we really need as a species right now. And maybe some of these theories are true, or at least have elements of truth. But even if that's the case, then what? As I said, I think the best use of our energy is focusing on community cohesion, staying connected to each other, supporting each other, rather than freaking out and spreading this stuff further and wider. Okay, so that's all I want to say about conspiracy theories. What I want to talk about right now is more specific stuff about food and bodies in the context of COVID-19. And with that amplification of wellness wankery and diet culture, what I just spoke about, all in what is a scary situation. This obviously causes ruffles, of course, as it does for every human, for folks with weird relationships with food and bodies, which, remember, is very likely the majority of women, which includes many trans and non-binary folks and an increasing number of men. And this unearthed trauma can show up as comfort eating. It can show up as not knowing what to eat, or not eating altogether, just putting off eating, or eating things that are a bit weird or don't match up. Or, even the limitations on food purchases at the moment. So the supermarkets where I'm at, sometimes there's a limit of 2 of a particular item maximum. And those limitations can trigger food restrictions and food rules in people that may have laid dormant for some time or weren't so bad before this all started happening. So if I can offer a little bit of advice there, I guess the very first thing I would say, especially for those who are putting off eating or feeling very restricted in their eating, is to try to make sure you're eating enough as an act of self-care. If your tendency is to have your appetite shut down when stressed, so even if you're not hungry, but if you're not eating, it means your immune system is going to be not as supported. And of course, when you're under eating, when you're underfed, this is going to heighten levels of stress and anxiety as your body moves into that cave person brain, as Dr. Jennifer Gaudiani so beautifully puts in her book Sick Enough. So yeah, eat regular meals and snacks and eat enough and get whatever support you need to do that, whether it's setting yourself an alarm or connecting with friends or working with a health practitioner. And for those folks who are eating more or sometimes eating more or eating at weird times, that's okay. Just remember it's okay, and to give yourself some compassion. Especially, some people have suffered from food insecurity, and in times like this, in uncertain times, these folks will turn to food for comfort, to make themselves feel safe again, and that's totally to be expected. And it's okay. It's okay. So that self-compassion piece, again, there it is, it comes in. Thank you, Dr. Krista Neff. In addition to the food concerns, we've also got changes to our relationship with body that are to do with exercise, movement. Obviously, at least where I live, all the gyms have shut down. You can't attend yoga classes anymore. There's no in-person yoga classes anymore. And of course, this can heighten body concerns, especially if people use movement, use exercise to regulate themselves. Some folks may over-exercise if they've got treadmills or whatever at home, and I don't want to give people ideas, but I know some people are doing that. I have clients who are doing this, or they're under eating, or both, to compensate for not being able to exercise in the usual way. The stress that all of this generates, I just want to talk briefly about what this looks like, just so that you can identify it if it's happening in yourself or in loved ones, those who are close to you, those who are living with you. And I was reminded of this in a recent webinar with amazing dietitians, Fiona Sutherland and Tracy Brown. And Fiona Sutherland I interviewed Fiona in episode 8, the last episode, the one before this one. So thank you, amazing non-diet comrades. But basically, they reminded me that they're just of the different ways that people respond to stress. There's kind of this activation response to stress where we go into this fight or flight mode. We feel really wired, unable to just, chill. And in terms of food and body and stuff, this may manifest as not feeling hunger as much, wanting to stay busy, wanting to continually do stuff and not stop and be productive. That's one way that we may respond to stress. Another way some people respond is the opposite, kind of feeling fatigued, feeling slow, and maybe even shutting down a little bit. And that might look like forgetting to eat. It might look like numbness. Or people may jump between the two. They may jump between being super mobilized and activated and being really fatigued and just being super tired. I've experienced both. I know that. I've felt both the slowing down and just needing to sleep more, punctuated by urges to get shit done, I'm also not every night, but some nights waking up in the middle of the night. Sometimes I'm not able to get back to sleep for hours, and that hasn't happened since I was a teenager. And of course, I'm not counting child-induced wake-ups here. So that's not normal for me, and I know that it's likely to do with the climate of anxiety that we're all living in at the moment. To be fair, I was a bit fatigued after coming back from overseas. So after traveling, especially how hectic things were getting in the airports on the way home, a lot of fear, a lot of tension. The last few days of our trip were pretty stressful. While I was in Bali and I was doing a very intense, amazing but intense yoga teacher training, I didn't get enough rest or food. Actually, I was sometimes hungry, and just not getting enough food. And this is not specific to the training I just did. It's actually a phenomenon that I find in yoga trainings and courses that are in person. I often find the food is inadequate for me. I am breastfeeding, so that's one thing, but I also just find that in yoga circles there's this real push to make the food super healthy, but that often gets translated as not enough protein, not enough fat, not enough solidity, not enough substantial food, just too much of a focus on salads and non-starchy vegetables. And I, for one, I was hungry. So that's a topic for another time. I guess I wanted to mention that because I do kind of have recent experience with undereating somewhat, and how much harder that made it for me to deal with the stress of traveling. When as I was returning home, I started getting a sore throat, and of course I was quite worried that I had contracted COVID, and I had a sore throat for a few days, but it went away, and I think it was just... yeah, it's a sore throat. But yeah, being underfed and tired probably didn't help. So look, I just want to finish this podcast episode with a little bit on how we can support ourselves and others. I've mentioned a few things already. And I'll just start with, I think, the most controversial thing, because I have been really critical of supplements and that kind of thing. Maybe so far it sounds like I've been critical. I'm a student naturopath, so I actually love a lot of that stuff. I'm not taking any supplements personally right now, but there are potentially some herbs, some herbal medicines, and just foods that could help support general immunity, not boost immunity, but support. And some of these, depending on your level of knowledge and experience, some of these can be wildcrafted. Some of these that are growing around where you live, or maybe even in your backyard. But as I said, you need to have the knowledge to do that, and you need to do it responsibly. And some of these foods are specifically antiviral. Some of these herbs are antiviral. But I want to stress that there is no evidence for specific protection from this virus, from COVID-19, and there's certainly no cure that we know of that's coming from herbs or anything, actually. Amidst the bogus supplements and remedies that I talked about being marketed for COVID, there is a small amount of information on herbal antivirals that I've found useful from Stephen Harrod-Buhner. He's actually released an essay on his website on this, and he's got a very scientific mind. He has a very solid understanding of viral mechanisms, of herbal actions, pharmacology and pharmacognosy, and theoretically what herbs could potentially be used at each of the stages of viral infection. And he's based these hypotheses on the SARS outbreak from a few years back and which plant medicines helped. But as I said, this is speculative, and it is no replacement for basic hygiene, washing your hands, social distancing, and all the measures that you've hopefully already heard about. So please keep distancing, keep hand washing. If you happen to be privileged enough to have some astragalus or some elder trees growing in your backyard or, very close to you, then that's wonderful. And if you have the knowledge of how to use those medicines to support your immunity, that's great, but it's not a big deal if you don't. Okay, so just wanted to mention that. And I'll put a link to that essay from Stephen Harrod Buhner and links to other things I might have mentioned in this episode as well. So in finishing, other ways that we can support ourselves and others besides, eating regularly, eating as best you can. And what I mean by that is all the stuff we already know, eating nutrient-dense foods, and that's not going to be accessible to everyone. So just doing your best. Also, if you need it, getting professional support. If you are experiencing a ramp up in your food and diet behaviors, and if you're looking for a dietitian to help you recover from diet culture and this food and body weirdness, of course, I do that. I do phone and online nutrition counselling. For Australians, I now can offer bulk billing for some folks, Medicare rebates for some folks, and I have sliding scale options, which I have had for a long time. And there are many other dietitians, non-diet, health at every size dietitians out there who also offer accessible services and non-diet services. So we're out there. In terms of being able to practice yoga, there are some wonderful body neutral all size yoga classes online. Dana Falsetti comes to mind. There are also other ones, curvy yoga, fat yoga. Look into that stuff. It's out there. Personally, I am also offering live online yoga classes every Saturday at 8:30 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, and they are donation based. So whether you can pay $2 or $5 or $10 or nothing at all, I leave it up to each individual student to make that decision based on how much they think a 60-minute class is worth versus what they can afford, and all of it is okay. Final thing I wanted to mention is that my giveaway on Patreon is still open until the 25th of April, and it's open to everyone. Originally, I made it only open to my Patreon subscribers, but I've opened it up to everyone. And the giveaway is a handmade mugwort herbal body oil, which so far is the only thing that has worked for me that enables me to go straight back to sleep when I wake up at night. I've noticed the evenings where I don't put it on, at least some part of my body, I'll be much more likely to wake up and not be able to get back to sleep. But I'm finding especially if I do a full body oil, I may wake up 1 or 2 times. I've night weaned Kyrie now, so woohoo, she's not waking up anymore, but I still am. But when I apply and give myself some self massage with the herbal infused oil just before I go to bed, I sleep better and I can go back to sleep much more easily than I otherwise would. So that giveaway is there. I'll put the link for the giveaway in the show notes. And I think that's all I wanted to say, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. Do stay grounded, stay safe, and look after yourselves. Support is there. Apply the filters, apply the mute, press the mute button, press the unfollow button, protect yourself, look after yourself. Thank you for being here and for straddling the tricky edges of yoga land and diet culture with me. I hope this podcast encourages you to compassionately and continuously question the ways that contemporary yoga is unfolding and interacting with other big forces in the world, to develop a discerning mind and open heart, and to skillfully dodge the diet BS that often comes along with studio culture. Like you, I'm eager to keep learning and sharing, and I put all relevant links in the show notes. You can find my blog, online nutrition counselling services, and lots more at funkyforest.com.au. While you're there, make sure to download my free ebook, A Modern Yogi's BS-Free Guide to Wellbeing. It's a light-hearted, easy read with my top 6 tips on dodging diet culture crap in the yoga world, whilst creating sustainable and balanced health from the inside out. If you love the podcast, please consider supporting my work at patreon.com/non-dietyogi. There are some pretty rad rewards there, such as exclusive content, discount codes, giveaways, and the ability to chat with me. as more episodes roll out, I'll be adding even more fun bonuses such as my non-diet yogi cookbook and mini courses. You can access most of the goodies at the lowest level, which is just $2 US a month, or around $2.90 Australian dollars. Like most mamas, I'm ridiculously busy parenting, working, studying, and all the rest. I've recorded a bunch of episodes, and some of these have required 5 separate takes just to get a whole episode done, as I need to wake up before my little ones to do it, and they get up very early. So I'm crossing my fingers that the Patreon will give me the financial capacity to keep doing this. Another way to support is to head over to iTunes and subscribe and review the podcast. That would be so awesome. Thank you. The in and outro song is Evening Glow by John Anderson. Thank you so much for being here. Until next time.